So if I bought Let It Be, it wouldn't be Lennon, McCartney, Gerstein.
It would not. It would not. No.
That would be awesome.
Although that has a really good ring to it.
In a world gone mad, there's 21 kilohertz.
Okay, so what are we talking about? We're going to talk about...
Okay, so we're going to talk about royalty exchange. The title of the show doesn't need to change. It's called Really Cool Uncorrelated Assets.
How about Really Cool Uncorrelated Musical Assets?
Well, Really Cool Uncorrelated Assets is the... I can add that in, but...
I don't know, man, but you like this one.
I did like this one. This is really intriguing.
You're a total fanboy of this.
I am. I am. This company, and basically what they're doing is they're selling your future earnings.
Yeah.
Which, because it's music, has a lot of backstops built into it. There's a lot of stuff to assure you that you are going to get those earnings. You know, I mean, is that, am I understanding this correctly?
You are. It's kind of like, well, first of all, this would wreak havoc with the space-time continuum. This could have been a whole part of...
God forbid.
This could have been a whole part of Back to the Future, but instead of the baseball almanac, right? Yeah, so what this does is there are guaranteed sort of royalties and income streams that exist when music is used. And what royalty exchange does, it allows people to own pieces of the copyrights, of the music itself, of the money that's coming in. And they can bid on owning this stuff, and as music gets used, money comes in the form of royalties, and the people that bought the piece of the copyright, the piece of the music, get to participate in these royalties.
So I'm selling my future earnings for profits now, and you are taking a chance in buying it. But since it's music, it's a pretty good chance.
Yeah, you're selling your future earnings based on your past success as the metric to define whether or not you're going to make money in the future.
All right, so we're going to talk now to...
Gary.
All right, so now we're going to talk to Gary Young, who is the head of business development at this company, Royalty Exchange.
Yep.
Yeah, so let's say, Ted, you own a piece of land in Nevada. You realize, oh my God, there is an enormous amount of gold underneath the ground. There is a real problem when it comes to financing building a mine to get the gold out of the ground, because it's very high risk, it's capital intense, and so there's these specialty financing companies in the precious metal space, and they'll come in and they'll say, Ted, we'll give you $50 million to build your mine, and in exchange for that, we want 3% of all the gold that comes out of the ground. And that company has less than 100 employees and a $6 billion market cap. It's perhaps one of the best businesses I've ever seen. So my two partners, Matt and Jeff, and I, we looked at this and we said, well, wait a second. Like, if we applied that model to the intellectual property associated with movies, music, TV, books, anything like that, we could build a really interesting business that solves a real problem for rights holders, and we also solve a problem for investors. For us, it seemed like the obvious next step. I'm sure there's probably a lot more questions after that, but...
No, there's a lot of things packed into what you just said. So, what is it that you do?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're a specialty financing company that serves artists, songwriters, producers, and gives them flexible options for financing their career and raising capital. And we do that in a few different ways. So Royalty Exchange is a marketplace where a songwriter can go and sell a percentage of a single song, a piece of their entire catalog, to more than 20,000 private investors.
So when you say you're allowing a songwriter to sell a piece of their song, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
What is a piece of a song, and what does a songwriter own that they're selling a piece of, and can only sell a piece of it, and do other people own it? Do they own it? Who owns it? How does all that, unpack that.
So in music, right, there's two copyrights. There's the sound recording copyright or the master's copyright and the composition copyright. And there's some other royalty rights, like the right to receive royalties from printed sheet music and that sort of thing. But those three, public performance, mechanical, and sync, are generally the bread and butter and the money-making aspects for songwriters. And so, going from those three, what we do is we'll often work with a songwriter and sell a piece of their public performance royalties. So let's say, Jeff, you wrote a song. Let's say you wrote Happy Birthday, right? And you're getting paid every time it plays, even though let's pretend it's not in the public domain for now. And if it plays on the radio, you're getting a royalty from either ASCAP, BMI, or CSAC. And you could come to Royalty Exchange and say, hey, I want to sell 10% of my future ASCAP royalties from Happy Birthday. And then we work with you to put together the financials and the history of earnings and tell the story of this asset. And then from there, we hold an auction for it where the investors on our site compete to own it, and whoever bids the highest wins and gets a piece of that future income.
So is there a real world example of this? I mean, looking through you, a bunch of people have done this. It's always easier to kind of ground this. Who's done this and how much money have they made?
Yeah, so I can give you a couple interesting examples. So we worked with the heir of the guy who wrote that Barry White song, "You're My First, You're My Last, You're My Everything," which awesome song. And he came to us and was interested in taking a piece of the future royalties and selling them just from that one song. So we took 25% of those earnings, put them up for auction, and they generated about $7,000 in the last year. And that 25% share did. And I think he certainly got more than $70,000. So I think like 11 times what he'd made in the last year on it. So basically he got more than a decade's worth of royalties up front.
So I write a song called Another Happy Birthday, and I just write it all by myself. So I own 100% of that particular song. And let's just assume that song has a track history of generating $10,000 a year. So I could come to your company and I'll say, hey, I'm generating $10,000 a year for the last 10 years off this one particular song that I own and I've hired this other company to help me deal with. I'd like to put this up for auction. How do you vet how do you qualify me? And then what happens next?
Yeah. So basically what we do is we look at we want to see the statements from, say you're with ASCAP. And so we want to see the ASCAP statements directly from ASCAP. And then, we get some basic information about you, your name, your address, all that kind of good stuff. And then we run a kind of a soft background check, which basically looks for, hey, is there any tax liens, divorce decrees, child support things, anything that could make it difficult to transfer, right? Mm-hmm. And then after we do that, and this all happens really behind the scenes, and this seems a lot more involved, but the person selling really doesn't have to do much. And then the next step really is we talk to ASCAP and say, hey, is there any other encumbrances on this stream of public performance royalties?
Well, that's interesting. So that's an interesting angle. So the fact is that there are third-party entities that exist in the world which can verify the revenue and are sort of independent, that are also responsible for the distribution and payment of that revenue. It's kind of like an external auditor, like KPMG, only you don't have to hire them because their business model is predicated on collecting that money and then paying it out. And they take a piece of it before they pay it out. Wow, that's clever. I hadn't even thought of that.
So the interesting thing about music, and this is going to be kind of wonky and financial, but So most other royalty streams don't have an independent third party that is collecting and paying on them. And they also, there's not a third party that basically registers title, if you imagine. So, and I know there's lots of, when you go back far enough in the music industry, there's lots of questions about who owns what. But ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, Harry Fox, those organizations have pretty good records of who owns what. And because they're independent and neutral third parties that collect and distribute the royalties, it makes these types of assets easy to transfer and safer for investors. Whereas if you have a patent and you're an inventor and the royalties are paid directly from one company, if that company goes out of business, or if that company decides not to pay, okay, you have to enforce by litigation, which is expensive. Whereas in music, all of these, the infrastructure is really in place, and that's why we focused on starting with music. And also, the other pieces. Music is way cooler than a patent on a door hinge, So,
Yes.
So that has certainly helped.
Who's on the other end? Is it fanboys? Is it investors? Is it people interested? Is it just someone who wants a piece of the artist? Because it's an interest. Because music has a lot of emotion involved in it. It's not, you're not always buying with your head. I mean, who's buying these? Who's buying on the other end?
Yeah, so it's a pretty wide range. So there's some money managers that are buying for their own private accounts. There's high net worth individuals. There's some small hedge funds and private equity funds, and there's also some wealthy fans that are involved as well.
And are they just looking for a piece? They're just looking for a piece of the artist. They're looking for some type of ownership, some type of skin in the game.
There's that. I mean, I think there's really three things they're looking for. So one, they're looking for income. And there's not many places in the world right now, in the financial markets at least, where you can get any sort of income that is relatively safe, right? The second piece is they're actually looking for things that aren't tied to the stock market. So if the stock market tanks tomorrow, people don't suddenly stop listening to music. Right, so they're what financiers call, music royalties are what are called uncorrelated assets.
Big word.
And there's not many of those. Yeah, I know, right? It's a fancy word. But there's very few of those left in the world. And then the third thing, of course, and you alluded to this earlier, is it's really cool to own a piece of a song and if you're out and you say, oh, this is playing on the radio, I'm getting paid right now.
Interesting. So the person who wins kind of technically becomes one of the writers, one of the creators of the they get that ownership. It's like they wrote the song.
Well, so it's a little different than that. So the credit on the song doesn't change at all. There's a special. Now we're getting really wonky, but
right. So if I bought Let It Be, it wouldn't be Lennon, McCartney, Gerstein.
It would not. No. Although that has a really good ring to it. That has a good ring to it. No. So basically, the PROs, the performing rights organizations, they have a special status called the payee status. So you're not a writer, you're not a publisher, you're someone who gets paid from it.
I get it. So they get a right to the payment, they don't get a right to owning the song, which there's a difference there, but it's a subtle difference.
I think they own they get to own the song, but they don't get any screen credit.
Also, it depends. So we've done deals where someone has sold everything and the copyrights, all of it. And then we've done deals where someone sells, like the Barry White example, the person who bought that doesn't own any of the copyright to that song. They just own a claim on 25% of the public performance royalties.
Oh, interesting. So it's not like they have a say in if it gets into a movie, if it's going to put on a mixtape or something like that. They don't have any say in that particular deal you're talking about. But there are other deals where people can actually have a say in if Steven Spielberg calls up and says, I want to use it in a movie, they can say yes or no.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Are you able to disclose to us the highest bid that has ever come in for an asset?
Yeah, so from an absolute number standpoint, the largest auction we've done went for $900,000.
Goodness. And what was that for?
It's for a song called Love by a songwriter and artist named Matt White. And it's a song that included the right to receive sync income, and the song is synced a ton. It's one of those ones that if we played it, you would certainly recognize it.
But if I'm going into one of these auctions and I'm, and I want to own a piece of a song that I love, in the end, I don't have anything that I own. It's not like I have, the Ted Williams baseball or the first issue of Superman. I'm not holding anything in my hand. But what do I get?
You get street cred.
How do I brag about it?
You do get street cred. You do get to hold in your hands checks unless you decide that you want direct deposit.
But do you send to the winner of the auction like a plaque of some sort or something framed with the document that gets signed that shows the ownership transfer or something like that?
We generally send a bottle of champagne. Yeah, that's a good idea.
I think it's a great. You put a little album cover on there, put a frame around it, and engrave it. Shit, that'd go right up on the wall. You want a piece of meatloaf?
Hold on one sec. I'm gonna write that down.
You're welcome. It's interesting because it almost sounds like you guys are taking the place of what record labels used to be or claim to be or aspire to be, in the sense that you're almost giving people seed money, in lieu of future earnings. And why are you different than what the old record company model was?
It's money without strings attached. And you guys know what record contracts look like. Our listing agreements are 3 pages long. They're written in plain English.
Interesting. But so it's all up front. It's all out in the open, and it's what it is, what it is. There's no creepy back deals. There's no, there's no guys with cigars promising one thing and delivering another, or lying flat out.
When someone comes to us and sells a piece of one of their songs, there's no minimum delivery requirements. There's no future obligations. It is, hey, this person bought this valuable thing that you own from you, and now you take the money and you can do whatever you want with it.
21 Kilohertz is sponsored by Audium. Audium gets songwriters, composers, and music publishers paid for the digital use of their music. If it streams on Spotify, Rhapsody, Tidal, YouTube, or is downloaded on iTunes, Amazon, or any other digital music service, you deserve to get paid the money you earned. Audium works for Metallica, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Jason Mraz, Jimmy Buffett, and thousands more. To get started, simply go to audium.com, provide your information, and collect your money. Audium. AUDIAM. Get paid for the use of your music.
Opening narration provided by Karin Gilfrey. Need the perfect voice for your corporate videos? How about some narration for your year-end presentation? What about a scintillating voice for your in-house voicemail system? For more information, go to karingilfrey.com. That's CARINGILFRY.com. All music on 21 Kilohertz is provided by freeplaymusic.com. Freeplay Music is an online, searchable music library anyone can use. At Freeplay Music, you can search and license songs to use in your video, your project advertisement, your business presentation, your movie blockbuster, your video game, or your kitty cat fashion show. Anything else you can think of. Tonight's music was Injuries and Nothing Else 2, a confident and positive British invasion track from the album Classic Rock Volume 2.